Right, we're live. So, hi everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us today. I'm Adam Gordon. I've been in recruitment since 1999. I've been building businesses in this area entirely to try and make talent acquisition better for the last 15 years. And I'm delighted to talk to you today about Poetry, our recruiter enablement technology. I am very pleased to be joined by my colleague Stephen and by my esteemed guest, Dylan Lees-Jones from Wipro. We're going to hand over to Dylan almost in a few minutes, but Stephen, do you want to just give a quick intro to you? What do you do? Tell us about your background.
Yeah, sure. I am Stephen. I'm the product experience manager for Poetry. So it's my job to listen to feedback, make platform improvements, and try and make the whole thing a joy to use. I've not quite been in recruitment since '99, considering I was born in the 90s, but I have been in it for about 12 years. Following that was 5 years in technology, so in various platforms and things like that. So yeah, nice to be here.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Dylan, give us an introduction to you.
Sure, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for inviting me here today. So my name is Dylan Lees-Jones. I am the recruitment marketing manager, the European recruitment marketing manager for Wipro, and I have been working for Wipro for just short of 3 years. So I've done about 7 to 8 years worth of employer branding, recruitment marketing, call it what you want. But I graduated back in '96, whilst we're on the subject of dates, as a marketeer. So I've done sort of mainstream marketing, but I've specialised working in this field for about 8 years now, and here to stay, hopefully.
Right, great. So first off, give us a bit of a sort of intro to what's recruitment marketing at Wipro? What's the company doing in the kind of recruitment world? What types of people are you trying to hire?
Sure.
What does the recruitment team look like? And what's your sort of responsibility within this area? What does it encompass?
Sure. Yeah, very good question. So, as I said, I've worked at Wipro for about 3 years, and we look after a specific type of recruitment marketing or recruitment per se talent. So we don't deal with the senior roles just as much as we don't deal with graduate recruitment. We tend to sort of do the more sort of tech hiring, so the sort of the middle sort of professional markets. So we're looking at people sort of maybe anything from 3 to maybe 15, 20 years worth of experience within that field. So everything from maybe a DevOps developer to a Python engineer or whatever. The roles are vast, but they depend on the types of verticals that we're recruiting in. So we work across loads of different technologies. So there are thousands of roles. And in a good year, we might be looking at sort of 16, 17,000 hires a year. And just in the UK that I look after, in a good year, we're looking at maybe 400 roles a quarter. But in terms of your question that you asked me, in terms of my role that I've been here, so key things, if I was picking them in threes, so I was brought in to build awareness. So where Wipro is extremely well known in India, it's perhaps struggled with its identity, maybe a little bit in Europe. So one of my remits has been to try and improve the brand awareness of who we are as an employer of choice. The second thing is about enhancing our employer brand perceptions. As we all know, everyone has an employer brand, but it depends. Is it a good experience or is it actually a bad experience? So that's been part of my job, to try and make sure that we're talking about the right things that good quality candidates want to hear about. And then the third role to that, or the third purpose of this, is all about quality control and consistency. And I think this is where Poetry has really come in and helped. So as a marketeer, I get very worried about things being produced, and we don't have thousands of hours to check every piece of communication. So part of my job is to come in to make sure that everything that we're talking about Wipro is consistent with our brand, and we're just making sure that we're not sending anything out there with errors, which has been a bit of a challenge in the past. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does. I've got a follow-up question. So Europe is a lot of different countries, and I think it's about 50, 60 recruiters that you're kind of partnering with. I'm guessing the hotspots are going to be sort of London, Berlin, Amsterdam, like where the sort of like industrial hotspots are, I guess. Is that about right?
Sure. Yeah, it is. So I look after 9 geos. So we've got the UK and Ireland, we've got Benelux, we've got the Nordics, we've got Southern Europe, which consists of France, Spain, Italy, Portugal. We've got Romania, Poland. I think I might have mentioned them all. So we look after all of them. And as I said, some geos look after specific roles for clients in those areas, just as much as we look after our clients in our geos. But the thing that brings us together is, out of those, I'd say about 80 recruiters, the one thing we all have in common is that one of my responsibilities is to sort them in producing leading sales enablement assets. So whilst there is an element of localization, what we need to be doing is trying to provide those recruiters with the assets or the recruitment marketing that they desperately need, that candidates are asking for. Yep. But second to that, it's not just about providing technology or tips and hits or whatever it may be to candidates. It's about building those relationships internally with hiring managers. And again, I think that is where the Poetry tool has really served us incredibly well as well.
Yeah, I really believe, I mean, I'm a believer that basically everything is marketing, right? So if I was doing your job, I'd probably want my tentacles in everything. But like, sure. I mean, there's only so much that one person can get involved in. But just one more question about that general sort of background is like language requirements. I'm assuming that there's certain types of jobs where it's just English is the business language. So English is the marketing. But I guess there's probably others where maybe do you have to do some translation type stuff? And
we do. It's a really good question, actually. For me, I think from an employer brand point of view, why should we assume that everyone wants to read something in English? And I think that with the tool that Poetry has, and just to make a caveat to this, when I came into the business, we used to have translation agencies. But for whatever reason, we don't have that now. Now, if I was a candidate in Poland, Romania, France, why should I have to speak or learn English? Okay, that's their choice. But for me, as part of an employer brand sort of initiative that I'd love to do is actually start using the translation work. And it's something that we've shared with our recruiters. And I think as part of the phase 2, that is something that we should be doing. So we should offer it in English, but I think it would be a smart move to maybe start doing some of our social media outreach posts in that language, rather than just assuming that everyone can speak fluent English.
Okay, let's talk through some of the specific solutions that you've been using within Poetry. Tell me about what the state, like what was the circumstance before, and how has Poetry been useful? So we'll start with job descriptions, because that's a very challenging and technical thing for everybody, I think. But give us the intro to that.
Yeah. Okay. So if I may, job descriptions, job ads, whilst they are slightly different, they're sort of one of that family. So I think when I came into the business, like I've been in other businesses, the biggest challenge that we often face is the quality. And if you like, the first touch point of any business, and I'm happy to be corrected on this and challenged, is that you might end up going onto a career site, you might go onto Glassdoor, or you might start following on LinkedIn because you've seen an ad. And you've read that ad and you think, oh, this is quite good. I'm just going to read a little bit more about the business. But the first touch point that you might have with that, or that candidate might have with your employer brand, is that job description or possibly job ad. And if that is something that's not been thought through, and it's that classic 2,000 words, and most people are browsing these days through a mobile phone, and it's just using language that's verbose, it's not really on brand, people are immediately put off. So one of the things that I did when I came into the business was that I immediately started on looking at our job adverts. And what we did is that we created a job advert guide. And that was actually trying to support all of our recruiters with what good looks like. And if we can start writing better quality ads, the chances are that will lead to better quality applications of candidates. And the beautiful thing that Stephen's helped us with is that he's now been able to take that template and built that into the Poetry platform. So whenever we produce a job description now, instead of it being 1,000 characters, it just does everything that we need. It highlights maybe 6 to 7 key responsibilities. And then from that, you can actually then ask Poetry to then create the job advert version, which is more about top of the funnel stuff, about why you need to apply for this job, rather than this is what you need to start practicing based on the technical interview that you'd hopefully get once you've received the job description. So that's been a massive help for us. And I'd say that the job description, the job ad has just been revolutionary for Wipro in the last 5 months.
So I think I want to touch on a point that you made earlier, which is around consistency. And it's really important that people are expressing the company in the way where, like, you know, every candidate is going to get the same impression of what it's like. And if people are going and starting things like job descriptions or job ads from the beginning, it's never going to look right. But alongside that, you already had done quite a lot of work around this is what the consistency should be with the guide that you'd already produced. So the ability to customize poetry to be able to make sure that that guide is like it's adhering to that guide's been something I think that's been quite useful.
100%. And what I would say is that the one thing that poetry has enabled us to do that I couldn't even do is where we provide a guide, it's then up to them to make sure that what they produce is something that is fit for purpose. Whereas now you can go onto the poetry platform, type in what you need to do, press a button, and within 20 seconds, you now have that template. And what that does, that gives people like me the peace of mind to know that they will now use that ad that I don't necessarily have to check, because we know that everything in the, so shall we say, in the back end is, it doesn't create things that are grammatically incorrect, and we don't have spelling mistakes, which is something that we possibly had before, because prior to poetry, we had to start doing spot checks of our ads. And sometimes we'd have to ask for ads to be pulled down saying, look, you've got the job recruiter guide, you've not followed that process. Whereas now with what poetry has offered us, we know that that is something that no longer happens. So by all means, go onto our career site and let me know what you think.
So now everything's better for context, on brand, no mistakes, more consistency. But I believe that recruiters can add their own sort of flavor into it. They can. It's not just bang, there's the template. It is. They have the ability to add their own spice into it. They want
100%. So
yeah.
For those of you who aren't familiar with it, yes, you can ask the platform to inspire me and produce it. But one thing that we do say is you can't just immediately take poetry's word for it. It's not to say that what poetry has done, but one, you can do it in 20 seconds. It's going to save you probably over 2 hours of your day producing ads, especially if you've got maybe 3 or 4. But what the advice that we do during our masterclasses, so since we've been working with Stephen, every week we have a masterclass and we remind people, whilst this tool is excellent, we have to check everything. Even though we live in the world of AI now, we can't guarantee everything 100%. So what we do is we still take a belt and braces approach. And once you're happy with it, and as you say, Adam, you've added your style to it, your finesse, then as far as we're concerned, we're good to go.
And one of the things that we've done over the last few months, Stephen, maybe you could just tell us about this. And I think it might have been inspired by you, Dylan, maybe, or maybe it was another company, I'm not sure. But the ability to add in or create job description and then instantly just press button which says convert this into an advert. That's something that exists, Stephen?
Yes, it is. And that inspiration comes from people like Wipro. You know, it's the ability to do something off the back of it, off the back of something that has had success in creating. So if the job description looks good and that's what you're going to use, you want your job advert to relate to that description. So, everyone will have that button now. It'll work with a varying degree of effectiveness depending on how you've set it up. But Wipro have set it up particularly well now, after a couple of iterations, to do what they deem as the best case example of what a job ad should look like, for that job description. So, yeah, it is. The other thing just off the back of that is that, you hear us talking about the ability to kind of input the guides into poetry and instruct things like job descriptions and job adverts. That was influenced through, this process is realizing, actually giving people the opportunity to just create one example of something might not always be the best. We have to allow some sort of creativity and flair. And actually people like Dylan have spent, loads of time putting all that together. So it's important that we hold a place where he's able to express that, and then recruiters can take it forward.
I think so. Just to add to that, I think the customization has been really important for us, and I can only imagine other people wanting to use this say, well, what has worked for Wipro doesn't necessarily work for us. But the fact that you've been able to take some of our sort of ideas and then be able to produce something that we're happy with, I think has been incredibly well received at Wipro. So yeah, thanks so much for that.
Stephen, Dylan said about you press a couple of buttons and then within 20 seconds, you've got the particular thing you want. Hopefully it's more like 5 seconds, Stephen, rather than 20.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, good. Just wanted to double check that. Okay, thank you for that. All right, let's move on to social media. I think that's another really important recruitment marketing talent sourcing channel. And there's a couple of different, there's lots of things you can do on social media, but the two in particular are like outreach. What's the message that you can send out to people? And of course, social media posts, like posting things. So two different things, the one-to-many and the one-to-one kind of approach. They've both got to be really great. Dylan, tell us about like, what part has this played in Wipro's recruiting, and like specifically how has poetry added to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think let's deal with the social media posting for a start. So we obviously, a lot of our recruiters have a license with LinkedIn, but I think one of the biggest challenges we've had is adoption, and that's no disrespect to the recruiters or Wipro. So just being very open, I think some of the tiles have been very well received, but some of them we still have that sticking point. But to answer the question, one of the things that I did was that when I first joined, I started setting masterclasses about the power of your own personal brand. And, you know, your job isn't just to go off and do what we've been talking about. Your job is to build an authority, which is your own personal brand. You're an experienced recruiter. You bring X number. You know this field very well. And we've always said, and we've always advocated, you have got to go out there with posts demonstrating what you bring and your knowledge and your authority. And it's been one of the biggest disappointments for me that people aren't using the tool as much as I would like to produce job-based ads. In terms of the outreach, they have been using this. And the reason they've been using this is because they do get training from LinkedIn about how to improve the quality of those posts. And as we know, with outreach, it's about keeping it simple, keeping it on brand, that kind of thing. And what we've tried to use here is trying to obviously demonstrate that, one, we're getting more responses, that kind of thing. I can't remember the metrics, I'll be honest with you, but I know that we've been pretty good on our outreach before. And what we've been doing is trying to advocate that you need to be using this tool more. But for me, part of phase 2 is that when we do this formal wash up, these are the sorts of things that we need to be using more. So I think that's been one of my disappointments, not using those tiles as much as they should do.
All right, let's move on to, as I said, like I think everything's marketing personally. So like the recruitment experience, every element of it as a marketing aspect to it, including interview questions and the way the interview is dealt. It's all part of the experience. So how have you used poetry to like allow recruiters to be able to more quickly or more effectively generate the right interview questions which are relevant for the job they're working on?
Well, again, it's another very good question. We haven't necessarily sort of been arbitrary in how we use it. I think similar to what we've been talking about, the user interface of poetry is just so simple. Whatever tile you're using, you click on what's relevant to you in terms of your vertical, your jobs, and what it produces is the content that you might need. Now, what we do know is that they've been using interview questions to help themselves when they do the HR interview. So one of our final stages is the HR interview. And I think one of the things that we've been encouraging is we don't want our interviews just to be the same as everyone else's. So start maybe using this to really sort of make that moment in the minds of the candidate, what was so special about that experience. And we've been encouraging that. And as far as I know, through the TA managers that I work with day to day, people have been using that, have been reporting how good those questions are because they're slightly different to maybe sort of the standard questions. In terms of the questions for hiring managers, that's where, again, it goes back to phase 2. Hiring managers are effectively the ones that will carry out the technical interview. They are the technical people. And I think some of the feedback that we had from some of our recruiters is, I dare go back to the hiring manager saying, here are some questions. But we were pushing back on that, saying, well, look, hiring managers are very busy. They have a day job. They might have 20 or 30 different roles going on, and suddenly they're back to back on interviews and they haven't had the time to plan. So what we've done there is that we've been giving them some coaching to say we can't just assume that they won't need these questions. These are busy people. They're working with clients day in, day out. They could be working on roles that are going to be super niche. These could be an aged role. So if they're aged roles and we're not finding these candidates, this is where we need you to manage that expectation to say, here are some additional thoughts that you might want to be thinking about, because we don't want candidates withdrawing. We don't want people dropping out. So again, work in progress, but certainly from the HR interview, I think the questions have been well received. Yeah. But from the technical interview, I think a bit more work to be done there.
Yeah, and I actually, I spent some time with the Wipro team this morning, and I thanked them because the candidate interview space in particular is one where they challenged us to make that solution better. Here is our examples of what good looks like. Here's what a good kind of screening, first stage looks like. Here's examples of what technical questions look like. And it's only, the new version of that was unveiled, last night to be kind of about how we address some of those challenges. And the feedback that we received on the call this morning was, more positive. So it is that kind of like, we're very happy to be proved wrong as long as we know what good looks like in the long run and the ability to be able to do that. So the Wipro team have really heavily influenced, what candidate interviews look like in poetry. And what the structure of them should be, and what options people have as defaults, because how they do things seems to be quite a good industry standard. So yeah, it's a shout out to them for that. It's been a good challenge.
I want to move on to another area, which is around like the different research options that are in poetry. But first, Luke Davis has asked a question in here for Dylan, which is, so we'll just go to this first, which is, given the clear time and quality gains in using poetry for job descriptions / adverts, what gets in the way of better user adoption, or what has helped to increase user adoption?
Oh, very good question. So what gets in the way of better user adoption? I think some people are set in their ways, Luke. That would be the question there. So one we've mentioned already on this call, we have masterclasses. And I think Stephen will back me up here, is that we will look at things like usage, people logging in and how many people are using the tool, how many people are building content. And we've actually almost had a hall of fame. And we pick on people, not deliberately, but we're here to support them. But we'll say, you've got to log in. You've not used this. And they might say, I've used the job board, I'm set in my ways, or I find that LinkedIn is better for this. So I think, it's one of those things that I think if we can demonstrate what good looks like and encourage people to do something and see the benefit of it, they're more likely to go back and think, wow. And I think one recruiter in particular, we've really turned him around, Steve. And I think you know who I'm talking about, where yes. he's been quite negative. But when Stephen has said, okay, let's have a look at this, he's then, okay, that's brilliant. I've seen a different perspective. So I would always say the masterclasses are absolutely essential, and the one-to-one tuition has really helped to improve adoption. But in the other ways, sometimes time. People, it's like LinkedIn. I'm sure there was a time where people had LinkedIn licenses and they just weren't using it, a bit like job boards, not posting ads on job boards, not doing Boolean searches on job boards. And then we say, we've got to use it. We've paid for this. So I think that's a challenge with any kind of SaaS product. So masterclasses are an absolute must on this one.
Just to give some context around that as well, the metrics, just being really blunt about numbers, Dylan has 55 users assigned to Poetry today. Of that, 51 people have logged in. So we've crossed that line of that being a challenge. But user adoption is sitting at around like the 45 to 48% mark. Now, I do have to say to Dylan that for technology, that is actually pretty good. So I know that when you invest the time in doing all these things and creating guides and making the effort, it can always feel a little bit disappointing if 100% of people are not using it all the time. But I do think the point that you touched on there, Dylan, the time and the understanding that comes with that time. Every week, you and I are discussing, slight upticks in numbers. Now, that might just be 2 more people have logged in this week, but it's 2 more to add to the tally, which is, a positive thing. So I think, having worked now for multiple tech companies, adoption is just something we struggle with as an industry, because you have people like me who are, were recruiters for 12 years, that a moment something new would come across my desk, I'd be like, oh, but I've always done it this way. and this way gives me results. So what we've really had to show through those masterclasses, which, by the way, Wipro have inspired me to take online as well, and there's going to be online resources for support for that. So there's going to be a whole menu of masterclasses based around the structure that we've set. Is just that it does take time for people to change their ways, and you need to illustrate the value within that and give them a reason why they should, and how to, if that makes sense.
So I think that's actually very good adoption, to be perfectly honest. Like the amount of times that I've heard people spending hundreds of thousands on CRMs that just get almost no adoption whatsoever. That's one area where I feel like there needs to be a particularly big improvement. But what I wanted to talk about last is there's a very large amount of research options within Poetry, and I have to say, Dylan, I'm not entirely sure if you and your team have been using these or not. But there, for example, there is I'm working on a job. It's a SAP consultant based in Barcelona. I've never worked on that before. I can go into Poetry and I can say, right, I need information about what's this job all about. I need information about what companies hire for this and what they're, and then I can go into the battle cards and get information about what's it really like to work at Capgemini or at Tata or whatever. There's a lot of different. Is that something that you've rolled out? Because I know that you've done a slowly, surely kind of phased rollout on things.
Sure. So out of the 14 tiles that we've had access to, job descriptions number 1, job adverts 2, research 3.
Okay.
So sometimes we are tasked by our clients or even hiring managers to find people that we might not actually have any experience of hiring. But the fact is, we've been asked to hire them. And so rather than giving up and panicking, this tool has really helped us. And I think what we've liked about this tool is that despite getting some research of talent insights, which only 2 people have access to, so we have to find time for that person to brief them to do the research. Here, somebody can just, as you say, Adam, can just go into the research tab, back that up with some battle cards data as well, and send that to a hiring manager or even a client, and even add in the skills-based hiring to say we're looking in the wrong place. And also to find these people, we can say the reason that this is an aged role of 18 months is because these people simply don't exist. So I think the research, the battle cards and the skills-based hiring has really helped us to manage the expectations, not only of our client, but build that relationship with hiring managers as well.
Wonderful. Okay. Dylan, thank you so much for your time. It's 2:27. So my big pleasure for me. Thank you for all the work that you and Stephen have done together, along with some other large international companies that have been working with us this year to really make Poetry a wonderful product. There's quite a lot of things we're still going to be doing. There's not a lot of additional solutions we're going to be adding, but there are still things that we're going to be doing to really enhance everybody's experience within the product. We've come a long way. I think just the one thing that, Dylan, you might find useful is in Q1, we certainly are adding in better design capabilities. So you've got approved imagery, for example, but you're happy with recruiters being able to like change the words, but have certain things that are locked in the images, that type of thing. That's not something that we have, but it's something that recruitment marketers have certainly been asking for. So hopefully that one's going to be useful. And big thanks from me. Stephen, any final comments from you?
Just a big thanks from me as well. That sounded like we're signing off like a 80s TV show. A thanks from me. Thanks from me.
One thing, just to finish, one of the things that has encouraged us all is that where we have so many recruiters. I think we talked about sort of 55. I think we have about 80 recruiters. So not everyone's used this tool. But one of the things that we've now done is that we've now put a business case forward, and we're now talking to Wipro India, of where we have 800 recruiters. So the plan is to take this proof of concept over to India with the data that we have, and who knows whether we whether we sort of roll out another proof of concept, because I don't see this being a geography thing. It isn't. This is a global tool that I think could help anyone, and I think maybe even more so in India, where there are multiple languages. They might actually find that using that for this would be great. So let's wait and see what happens. But yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant, and it's certainly helped me with my time and managing the expectations of the TA team in Europe as well.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. See you all soon.
Thanks
Cheers.
so much. Cheers. Bye.